Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Regal Podcast with me, Jordan Lewis, and my good friend, Harry Cuttress. Today, we are going to be talking about happiness, why you don't want it, why you should embrace your unhappiness. So, to get started off, Harry, what are you talking about? Why should we embrace our unhappiness? What do you mean?
Put very, very simply, when I talk about happiness, I'm meaning being happy all the time. I'm talking about the comfort zone. I'm talking about this kind of everything's good. Let's just chill out. Don't worry about it. That kind of just lack of ambition, that kind of contentness in life. And I think it's probably what's holding a great many of you listeners right now. And to an extent, myself, and to an extent, Jordan as well. I think it's what's holding many of us back. Put very, very simply, all of the significant changes I've seen happen in this world, whether it be individual changes or whether it be somebody going out and doing innovation that revolutionizes a product or a service or just completely changes the world, they're almost all born out of pain. And when I say pain, I mean it's a common thing we talk about marketing all the time, which is you're looking to find your client's pain points. What is the actual thing in their life right now that hurts? And then what you're trying to do is provide a product or a service that takes away that pain, or at least helps with that pain. And I think that when it comes down to it, in terms of your own life, in terms of your own motivation, in terms of you getting up off your ass and doing something, it's a matter of pain as well. So when I say embrace unhappiness, what I mean is rather than being the kind of person who, when you're in pain, you kind of go, oh, just forget about it. Or you put on Netflix, or you do one of 1,000 other things. You drink, you go smoke, you do whatever it may be to distract yourself from feeling that in comfort. Instead, what you should be doing is digging down deep, talking with yourself, doing some meditation, some therapy, whatever it may be, and working out specifically, what is this pain? Where is it coming from? What is it in my life right now that's causing me this kind of emotional pain? Or maybe even physical pain, could even manifest itself even worse. And then deciding, right, I'm in pain because I feel unfulfilled at work, or I'm in pain because I'm stressed out about my financial situation, or I'm in pain because I am resentful in the relationship I'm in. Well, once you identify what the problem is that's causing the pain, you actually have an action plan, and you can make a step-by-step guide of how you're going to cover it. So if, for example, it's financial instability causing pain, you can go and say, right, well, I need to go get a better paying job. So I'm going to work on my CV, work on my interviewing skills, and go get a better paying job, or ask for that promotion, work on my self-confidence so I can go ask for my boss for a pay rise or a promotion. Or, right, now's the time to start a podcast, a YouTube channel, a side project, start a Shopify store, whatever it might be, write a book. There's all these things you can do to start making progress. And the point I'm making is none of that progress can happen, and none of these improvements can be made, and none of these benefits can happen both for you and for the wider community, your friends, your family, and society as a whole, if you don't first embrace the pain instead of running away from it and trying to hide from it.
Okay, so you've almost got a very Tyler Durden philosophy, from Fight Club, where it's when he does the kiss and then puts the salt or the acid on his hand, it's not, don't drift off, don't start thinking about something else. It's very much just face that pain, learn from it, grow from it, kind of mentality.
You absolutely cut out during that. I heard something about Fight Club. The rest of it was sketchy. So do you mind just repeating yourself? Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So it's almost like Tyler Durden in Fight Club.
Same thing's happened again.
His hand and then puts the acid or the Give me 1 sec. I'm going to switch to my other Wi-Fi. So it's almost like Tyler Durden in Fight Club, where he kisses his hand and then puts the acid or the solution on it that then makes it burn and fizz and dissolve. And when he tries to drift off and think about other things, distract himself with the pain, Tyler Durden slaps him and then literally says no, embrace the pain, so that he can then grow and learn from it. So you share a very similar philosophy to Tyler Durden in that respect.
I don't know specifically enough about Tyler Durden or Fight Club. It's a film I watched once at university. I haven't seen it many times. So I'm apprehensive to say whether or not I agree or disagree with his specific philosophy, just because I don't want to be misrepresenting what I think. But what I will say is maybe not in terms of the physical pain. If you've got acid on your hand, you should be getting rid of that because that's going to cause significant damage. If there's a dog biting your arm, I'm not saying you should just go and just ignore it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when there are these things, and we all know what they are, we all have kind of little mechanisms we have in our own lives, certain kind of habits we have to avoid confronting these kind of dark truths or these unpleasant thoughts or these kind of unpleasant feelings that we have. And it's embracing those. So whether it's that time, for example, I'm sure we all do this, when you just something goes through your head and you get really angry about your significant other or a friend or a colleague or something like that. And you kind of stop yourself thinking because you go, well, no, they didn't do anything that bad. I shouldn't be this angry. Rather than kind of just dismissing it, take a deep breath, try and figure out where is this anger coming from? Because it may have nothing to do with them. It may be you have an anger towards one of your parents, and that's being put onto another authority figure in the form of your boss or your manager or whatever it may be. And therefore maybe like this trauma that's being dragged into the present and it's kind of leaking through into your conscious and affecting you. And what I'm saying is rather than hiding from this and trying to bury these feelings down deep, what you should be doing is kind of actively seeking out where are these negative feelings coming from? What can I do about them? And that could mean going to therapy and speaking to a counselor. It could mean meditation and kind of these hallucinogenic or holotropic hallucinogenic breathing. There are lots of people who talk about illegal substances that help them with this process. I'm not going to specifically, obviously, give my recommendation to any of those. But there's lots of ways of doing it. And what the point I'm trying to make is, if you want to really have significant growth in life, you need to have a reason why you're doing it. And that reason's almost always born out of pain. So both in terms of your own happiness and in terms of you being able to achieve your goals and be successful and feel fulfilled, you need to kind of embrace this pain you've got, this negative feeling, this upset you have, so you can use it as motivation and fuel to move forwards.
So if you had, talking hypothetically, if you had somebody that had overall had a pretty easy life, maybe they were born into money, they didn't really have any problems getting into any school, they haven't really had any significant pain, but they want to improve, but they don't have that motivation, that reason why that comes from this pain, as you just sort of talked about. Do you think then that they should actively go out and try and seek some sort of pain in terms of being able to use that as a driving force, as a reason why to then grow and learn? Or how do you recommend they go about that then?
Okay, the first thing I'd say is I don't believe that just because you happen to be born slightly more financially viable or financially in a slightly more financially successful family means you're not equally going to have certain pains and traumas, for example. Admittedly, they will
I
have
don't mean that
advantages.
it's just because you're wealthy. Sorry, yeah, I don't mean that they don't have any pain or don't have any like pain points. I was just using a specific example. For example, this person was born into a wealthy family, which means they didn't deal with various money problems, but they just also happen to not have a life that was filled with any particular pain, not because they were wealthy or born into wealth, just as another thing.
Yeah, I don't believe that it's possible to be a human being alive in this world over the age of about 10 who doesn't have some form of pain in their lives. I think to live is to suffer, and to suffer is to live. I think it's kind of a duality that's necessary in life. You can't appreciate the positivity without also at times suffering from the negativity. You can't feel joy without also feeling sadness. So I don't think there is anybody alive, maybe with the exception of certain kind of Buddhist monks or very kind of spiritualized people who've kind of developed this level of enlightenment. But outside of these kind of people, or maybe particular religious figures, but I don't feel that for kind of the average person, anybody is without pain. I think it's more a question of what the pain might be and whether it's as on the surface and obvious. So, for example, if you're growing up in a family with one parent and 5 siblings, and you essentially have no, you don't have money for new clothes, and you are really struggling financially. That's a really kind of obvious pain point. It's right in front of your face. It's really clear what's causing this pain in your life. And therefore, it's a very easy action step to go, right, well, we need to fix this problem of money. So I'm going to go get a job as well to help support this family. Or I'm going to go do this, and, the clear action step. In the case of somebody who, for example, it's not a financial issue because all their financial needs are taken care of. It's not a success issue because due to nepotism and family networking, etc., they don't have to worry about that. It could actually be kind of 2 levels deeper, which is on a more subconscious level. They don't feel worthy, and they actually have this inner guilt because everything they've succeeded has been as a result of their family and their parents, not their own hard work or them personally having done anything to earn it. So in that kind of scenario, it might be this person needs to quit that job, take a step away, stop in using their parents' money, and intentionally put themselves into a situation where they're kind of financially struggling, so that they can build up this kind of self-respect and get rid of this guilt and prove kind of to themselves that they are capable of surviving by themselves, even if it's only for, say, a year or so, or a couple of years, before saying to you back to the parents, "Oh, thank you so much. It was just something I need to do for me. I'm happy to kind of continue to receive financial benefit from you," or whatever it may be. I think there's always something somebody can do. The question is, how obvious is the pain, and how obvious is the cause of that pain?
Okay, that makes sense. And one thing you touched on as well is that to find this pain and learn what this pain is, you could go to a therapist, you could meditate, you could do one of 100 different things that people have tried over the years. Most people that I know, and I'm not sure if you'd agree, so you'd have to let me know, but I would argue that most people don't, they're not only not good at being self-reflective, myself included. I'm awful at self-reflection. They're not only, but a lot of people are not only not very good at it, but they're also not interested in self-reflecting because they are happier to live this life of comfort, or perceived comfort anyway, that they are living at the moment, rather than put themselves out of their comfort zone, figure out what the pain is, and then actually have to take action to fix that. So yeah, what would kind of be your response to that then? Like how do you reckon that people who aren't interested in embracing the pain go about exposing themselves to it?
My stance on it is kind of very libertarian, in the sense of, I believe that people's lives are their own to live, and they can choose how they wish to live it. So if there's somebody out there who goes, "Look, I can tell that I'm unhappy, but I don't want to deal with it. I am comfortable in my life where I get home, I have a few beers, I put on Netflix, or I put on the football and I watch the sport, and that distracts me. And then I go to bed, and I wake up next morning, go to work, repeat. And I don't want to think about it. I don't have to think about it. I've got these coping mechanisms. I can just distract myself from it. If that's the life they want to live, more power to them. I have nothing against it. My my focus is more on the people who say, "I actually do want to make a change here." The people who go, "Right, this isn't working. What can I do?" The people who realize, "Right, I have this ambition. I really do. I get up at 6 a.m. I'm doing all these things right to be building my business, but I still feel like an imposter, or I seem to be self-sabotaging, or I really want to get into a good relationship, but I seem to keep screwing it up." Well, those kind of examples, if they are looking to actually fix the problem, and they don't just want to kind of repeat the same cycle, then those are the kind of people I'm talking to. The people who are actively wanting to make a change. Because I don't think you should be forcing change upon pretty much anybody.
Okay, so yeah, you're kind of happy for the what are called the delta types, for lack of a better term, that we talked about last week, that essentially just want to go through the motions. They don't want to have to go through that pain, that deeper kind of change in their life. You're happy for them to do as they want, continue down that path if that's what they so choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we should require people to go train and become better physically. And I don't think the same should apply mentally either. I don't think it's anybody's right to dictate that somebody else needs to go and work on their mindset. I don't think that anybody has the right to force me to undergo a mental procedure, kind of like counseling or therapy or something like that. And equally, I don't think if I broke my arm, it should be anyone else's right to force me to go to a doctor to have it physically looked at. I believe that you kind of should have autonomy. And if you are happy, inverted commas, with your life, and you're kind of just content for things to stay the way they are, or you see the burden of change and the effort you're going to have to put in to kind of realize this change as too great and the sacrifice is too big, then that's absolutely fine. It's your decision to make. Absolutely. My reasoning for this whole video and this kind of rant I went on, that kind of started it, was essentially all born out of, for the people who are out there who seem to realize that there is something inside their own heads holding themselves back. There's something that they can't seem to keep control over in their own behavior, their own emotions, their own mindset. It's for those people who do genuinely want to change, but for whatever reason, something's holding them back. It's to help those people.
I fully agree with not forcing anybody to do anything. I'm completely on your side with that. Nobody should be forced to do something they don't want to do at the end of the day. But wouldn't it be more beneficial if there was somebody like you, not necessarily you, but somebody like you, basically saying, like, look, perhaps it's worth considering that you should change, and kind of making these people that maybe aren't aware, like, because at the end of the day, people who are aware are only aware because, let's say, somebody like you has then told them and made them aware of this different path. Some people may be happy going through the motions, but only because they are not aware at all that there is another option. So wouldn't it be better for society as a whole, and also each individual, if there was people going around, or a person that was very much a voice of, like, look, I'm not going to force you to make these changes, but in my opinion, you should make these changes. These are the reasons why. This is how you do it. Because then it's not, I'm forcing you to change. I'm not forcing you to embrace your pain. I'm saying, I believe you should, and offering you a path to do that. Do you believe that would be better than sort of just trying to help the people who actually are aware and are interested, and then letting everybody else kind of do what they want?
Oh, absolutely. I think the very fact we're doing this podcast is kind of in effort to exactly that mindset, which is maybe people might see this and go, oh, you know what, that does sound like me. I am self-sabotaging this aspect of my life. Okay, maybe I can reach out, or maybe I can read a book, or maybe that can set me down the path, whether with me or with somebody completely differently, or completely by yourself with the help of YouTube and audiobooks or whatever it may be. Set you down the path to be able to kind of work through these issues and help yourself, or go to therapy and counseling and with somebody you trust, and kind of work through the issues. Absolutely. All I'm trying to make clear is I'm not trying to force this upon anybody. In terms of, do I think it's better for society? I am very, very hesitant to ever suggest that something is better for society, because it's far more likely that there's going to be an unintended consequence that screws it up than it is that's going to work perfectly. If you just look at every single change to society that anybody has ever made or suggested, there always tends to be some form of kind of negative comeback or negative unintended consequence. So that's kind of my focus on it, which is, I don't want it to be forced upon anybody. I don't want schools to hear this and kind of start implementing it and kind of pushing people towards it. I think that's just going to cause all kinds of issues that I don't have the intellectual capacity to even foresee. That said, I do hope that maybe, like you said, there are people out there who might stumble across this video, or get a friend might send it to them, or whatever it might be, and they can go, oh, you know what? Yes, I am self-sabotaging. I do want to take action. I do want to kind of improve my life, better myself, better my relationships, better my mindset, better at all these kind of issues in my life, and might kind of set themselves on the right path. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's awareness, not forced action. Because I've heard there are some groups that I'm not going to name that they genuinely believe, and I believe they come from a good place, but they believe that, you know, like, essentially, like, self-improvement should be forced, like legalized, kind of like made law, that everybody should be doing certain amounts of self-improvement every day, as an umbrella term, self-improvement. Now, I think it comes from a good place, because obviously it helps people improve by definition, but I I definitely agree with you. Like having that kind of having it legalized, having it forced, um, having laws, sorry, not legalized, and having it forced on people would be far more destructive for society than the. And then the other thing I kind of wanted to discuss then is you've got essentially two sides to this debate. You've got one side basically trying to almost keep people as they are. So let's say you've got this group of people, they are aware that they could be changing. They just need a small push to put them on that track of self-improvement, of embracing that pain and then going down this track of improvement, like we kind of discussed just now. You have one side that I have seen firsthand of people that reinforce the very kind of happy-go-lucky kind of behavior, just like embracing what you are now rather than trying to embrace the pain and go through self-improvement. And I don't necessarily trying to do this, but like for example, you will probably know, and I know from first-hand experience, that when I first started making changes in my life and actually, trying to teach myself skills, trying to make a name for myself, trying to show some ambition and stuff, it was a lot of my close friends and family at that point that were just kind of they literally would, some of them would try and deter me from that. They would, oh, like, I know you want to do this work for your business and sort of connect with these other business owners and stuff, but wouldn't you rather just go out with us or come out with us? Or they would call me boring. For example, a lot of my old friends would call me boring if I decided not to go out for drinks. And it was a very, very, what felt at the time, hostile attack on some changes that I wanted to make to my life, which I know that a lot of entrepreneurs and success coaches and stuff have all experienced as well. It's very, like, when you make changes in your life, a lot of your circle at that point will be hostile, or they'll try and prevent you from making those changes for whatever reason. So my specific question is, how can people like you, for example, compete against people who are directly and openly trying to deter somebody from making positive changes in their life, from embracing their pain, if you are taking simply an awareness approach rather than something that is equally as aggressive almost on the other side? And to clarify, I'm not suggesting that you should be aggressive with it. I'm just saying, how can you compete? Like, surely the other side of this argument are going to win if they are simply being more aggressive, more open, more forceful, because it is difficult to compete with that, surely.
It is. And just very, very quickly, I'm going to kind of take a slight tangent to kind of discuss exactly what you just said, which is the main reason why a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, self-improvement people, people who start going to the gym, anyone who tries to kind of better themselves in any kind of way, seems to get resistance from the established social group or their family circle or their friendship circle or whatever it may be. The reason for it is you are basically being a proven example to them of all the potential that they are leaving behind. So say, for example, let's say it's you and I and two other friends, and you suddenly start going to the gym and eating healthy and taking care of yourself, and you start looking a lot physically better, and you kind of put on a bit of muscle and you tone up a little bit and you start looking really good. Whereas me and these other three are still kind of going to the pub and having a pint every night and having kebabs afterwards and having not really taking care of our diet or not really exercising, not doing anything. And we're kind of not looking good, and we're not looking kind of physically up there, and we don't look as good as you do. The reason there's that hostility is your very existence around me makes my brain realize, oh, I could be doing all these things. I could be going and becoming a better version of myself. I could be becoming happier and healthier and physically stronger and more confident. And I could be doing all these things, but I'm choosing not to. And there's that kind of self-resentment that's kind of caused, and people don't particularly like feeling resentful. And so we often kind of turn that into anger on purpose to kind of get rid of this emotion. And that's why it comes across, like you said, very hostile, very aggressive. So that's the main reason for it. So the argument I've always kind of, or not the argument, but the kind of points I've always given and the advice I've always given to clients is, you are going to face this hostility. Take it as the compliment that it is, which it is, you are becoming an example of what they wish they could be. You are doing things they wish they had the willpower or the self-belief to be able to do or start doing. So just simply by existing, you are making them feel insecure. Now, you shouldn't want to go around making people feel insecure, but if your mere presence does it as a byproduct, you should take that as a compliment, because it shows that you are advancing up the hierarchy, you're becoming higher status, and you are kind of an example to people of what they could be if they were willing to put in the work and put in the effort. So in terms of how do I counteract that, the simple answer is, again, I focus a lot on this kind of, I don't want to be aggressive because I do not want in any way to be forcing anybody into doing this. So it's very much a case of, I put the content out there, like for example, this podcast. Somebody might see this podcast and go, right, I can go and do this kind of self-help, this self-development. I can go and improve on these things. That's given me a little bit of motivation, so I know what to do. They might then reach out to me. And at the point in which they have chosen to make contact, I'm willing to be slightly more aggressive. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean that in the sense of, look, this is going to happen. So you need to proactively, for example, take a month off from your friends. And I don't mean ignore them completely. I mean, if your friends, say you're trying to eat healthier and you're trying to get to the gym and stick with it and commit to it, here's what you need to do. You need to change the habits and the routines you have in place that were dragging you down the wrong path, and instead implement these habits to put you in the right path. And as you do that, say, for example, use the gym analogy, you're going to start meeting people at the gym. You're going to start meeting new people with better habits. And by meeting those new people, they are going to keep these habits in check and keep these new routines, which means you can stick with it. The issue lots of people try to make, say, for example, an addict, say someone tries to quit smoking, is they try to quit smoking, but they have the same group of friends who always smoke. So now, rather than it being, okay, I've quit smoking, you get over the original cravings to begin with, and then it's nice and easy because you just don't put yourself in those situations. Instead, they're going back out to the pub with people who smoke, and now you're the person sat inside watching all the phones in people's bags while everyone else has gone outside for a cigarette. Well, you've put yourself in a situation where there's more mental energy in not complying with previous behavior than there would be to fulfill the new change. So it's about changing your environment. It's about changing the focus in which you look at things. And it's about sometimes having difficult conversations like, look, mate, I have no issue with going to the pub with you. And I have no issue with us having a few pints, but I'm not doing it every night anymore. I've started this. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling healthy. I'm starting to look good. I'm really happy with this. And I'm not going to jeopardize all that. It has nothing to do with our friendship. You're still a mate of mine. We're still close. We can still hang out. We can still do all these things. But this one specific behavior that we have kind of as a routine, which is lots of pints and then greasy food or whatever it may be, that behavior I'm not going to be involved in as much. So whether it's, do you want to come to the gym with me and we can make that our everyday after work routine? Great. If you don't, no issue. We can still go to the pub on weekends and watch the football, or if the football's on a Tuesday night, we can go there on the Tuesday night, but I'm not going to be doing it every single night. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. And I think it's a question of, once somebody is willing to reach out and take the first step, which is to kind of ask for more information, that's when I can kind of prepare them a bit with a bit more detail and a bit more specifically in specific depth about what they're going to face in terms of this aggression of people trying to hold you down and hold you back from self-improvement.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And like for me personally, I can talk from personal experience. Like when I started getting into primarily entrepreneurship at this point and sort of the self-improvement like industry arena kind of thing, one of the biggest problems I personally faced, and one of the things that made it particularly difficult for me to sort of improve myself and go down this path, is that not only were a lot of my friends, mostly my friends, were aggressive towards it in ways you just described, but I actually ended up losing, like it's not an issue now, like my friend group then to now is completely different, but I think there's literally 2 people, maybe 3 people that are just like still in the friend group. But it was difficult for me because not only was I trying to contend with my own pain and my own what I perceived weakness, I was then also contending with the fact that I was going to and was losing all of the people that I associated with on a daily basis at that point. So I have my own answer because obviously I went through this and did it. I'm curious, what is your answer? How can people not only contend with their own pain, but be okay with improving and as a result losing friends that they previously, or friends and relationships in general, that they previously held as some of their more valuable ones, basically?
I mean, the first step, and this is the step to kind of most answers, this will be my answer to kind of most questions I receive, which is abundance. And this has nothing to do with the quality of the relationship when I make this statement, so I don't want to be misrepresented. But it's far easier for somebody like me, for example, to decide, right, I'm going to start going to the gym a lot more. I'm going to stop going down to the pub on a Thursday night and eat crap food and drink pints and watch the football. It's easier for me to do that because I know that, yes, I may lose out on spending as much time with this person, but we have shared values and we have other interests outside of just that one specific behavior. So there's other things we can do together. And also the fact that I already know that I do have other friends. So I know, for example, that if that happens and I only get to see this person, say, once a month as opposed to 5 times a week, I know that those other days of the week, there are other things I could be doing with other friends who, for example, won't necessarily be as damaging as the original behavior was. So in the example of, say, smoking, for example, it would be, my recommendation would be, you should have some friends who are non-smokers. Otherwise, it's kind of a very weird kind of almost echo chamber of addiction there. But it'd be a case of just make sure you're focusing a bit more time on those people who aren't going to tempt you back into having another cigarette, or remove yourself from behaviors that make smoking more common. For example, we know that there's a lot of social smokers, people who drink when they go out clubbing or out to bars. Just avoid that for a little bit. Or kind of you put a kind of a punishment system in place where you have a close friend, you and I do exactly this, which is, right, here's a behavior I want to stop doing. Every time I do the behavior, I'm going to send you £5, £10, £1. You can make up an amount you want. Just make it painful enough that it deters the behavior, but not so painful that you do it once and you're bankrupt and you're just destroyed. And it's exactly that kind of situation, which is, if you have multiple interests and multiple friends, and not all of them are kind of one social circle, but you have kind of pockets of people you enjoy spending time with and people that you share different values with, then the loss of one person, as you kind of realize that you're evolving and you're leveling up and you're moving to a better version of yourself, you're almost kind of like shedding this past life of yours and moving on into the future. You won't be as resentful or upset by leaving somebody behind, because it's almost the same as, well, this person is just going to drag me back down. This person, for example, chain smokes all the time and has a real thing about, mate, if you're not smoking, like kind of fuck off. If you've got that kind of person with you who's, for lack of a better phrase, toxic and actively trying to drag you down and encourage bad behavior that you're trying to stop, quit, prevent, whatever it may be, then you shouldn't kind of mourn the loss of this person. You should be kind of happy with the fact that you've able to upgrade your social circle and upgrade your friendships and your relationships to people with better habits and then people with a better influence and a more positive influence on you.
Yeah, I agree, and that's definitely kind of my experience. Like, I don't believe and didn't believe then that they were trying to actively encourage it in order to be toxic. It was more of, I kind of discovered that a lot of my friends, the only thing that I had in common with them, like through me improving and gaining other interests, there was a time, I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast before, I know I've discussed it with you and I know you're aware of it, but there was a time where my only interest essentially was either gaming and then going out pretty much like at least 4 times a week. Now, I obviously had a friend group that also did that. And if that's what like they want to do, there's nothing wrong with that. That's their life choice. As we sort of said, there's no point forcing somebody to live a life they don't want to. But what I was essentially discovering is, as I was gaining other interests, like for example, entrepreneurship, looking into businesses, stocks, reading about all these other self-improvement areas for improvement, fitness, all this sort of stuff. As I was gaining more interests and also more positive interests, and when I say positive, I mean have a positive impact on my life, I was essentially sort of discovering that with these friends, the only interest that I actually shared with them is going out and drinking at clubs. And I think that's why I stopped being friends with them, not because they were particularly toxic towards me about it. It's more just I discovered that the only thing we had in common was the negative habits that I didn't want to have anymore. And as a result, you aren't friends if you don't share interests, basically. So it kind of just broke down from there. And then to kind of reaffirm what you said as well, like at the beginning it was hard because I was at this point, all of my friends, my friend group was literally a circle. Like I was part of this one friendship circle, and it was quite a big group. So I didn't really think or bother looking for other groups, like you kind of said, having some that smoke, some that don't, etc. And at the beginning, it was quite scary because I was kind of like, well, now that I'm no longer friends with the majority of this big group, they're then going off as the big group still, and then I'm kind of isolated from that group. And at the time, it was scary, and it was like for a little while quite lonely. But then, as you said, like after a little while, not only did I start to realize that it was positive that I was then out of that friend group, but also because I was then doing different things, had different interests, in the space of maybe a month or two, I was then meeting loads and loads of new people that had these new, more positive shared interests. And like I said, now I've got a fantastic friend group in a circle that, share these positive interests. And instead of tempting me, oh, why don't we just go out drinking? Like, I know you can't because of COVID, but instead of just being like, oh, why didn't you have a drink here? Why don't you just go do this? Why didn't you just have another takeaway? It's now they're reaffirming my positive like habits that I'm building. So like you've kind of, I'm sure you've seen before on my Instagram, if I post a picture of me after a workout that I've done, I will get probably 5 or 6 messages from people just in my friend circle now, and my following as well, that are like, yes, that's amazing, well done, and they reaffirm that positive behaviour, and that in and of itself helps. It's not the sole reason I continue doing it, but it definitely helps having that positive reaffirmations from people that I actually value as people, like in terms of their opinions. So I can definitely see what you're saying from first-hand experience.
Yeah, the other thing I'd pick up on really quickly is you made a really kind of impressive link between the two kind of topics we've discussed here, which is, say, for example, you discover this pain point, which is you're unhappy with the fact that, let's say, smoking. And you decide, right, I want to get out there, I want to change my mindset, I want to get over these bad habits of eating crap and smoking and not going to the gym and not taking care of myself. And by doing that, you kind of level up and you start leaving some friends behind. And you've now developed a situation where you don't perhaps have the same kind of social circle you once had. Now you embrace the pain again. You go, right, I'm in pain. Why am I in pain? I'm in pain because I'm lonely. I want to be able to socialize. I want to kind of have these connections with people, and I can't have it because I feel lonely. Okay, well, how do you fix that? Go out and develop social circles. Go out and meet people. Go out and do things that you're interested in doing that you would do anyway, whether that's play a sport or take part in debate or poetry or art or just do crazy golf. It could be literally anything in the world, whatever you personally find interesting. Go do it. And you're going to, if you do that repeatedly and you have some level of social skills, many of which you can probably learn in my book, which I'm not going to shamelessly plug this episode. I can see you laughing. I haven't plugged it. I haven't said the name. Not least because I get fined if I mention it. But go back to previous episodes, you'll find the name, you'll get a link in the description. Buy it, it's really good. Anyway, the thing is, if you have these kind of social skills and you are going out and you're going out with the intention of having fun, that alone, having fun, is like a magnet. It draws people in. People want to be around somebody who's having a good time, who's positive, who's got just this vibe.
Who's 11 out of 10.
Fun. Who's getting an 11 out of 10. Yeah. You want to be around the person who's high energy in the room and is giving value to people and encouraging people and bringing people into the conversation and is having this amazing time. You don't want to be around the person who's like the energy vampire, who's in the corner just sucking the fun out of everything by being either too serious or taking themselves too seriously or just trying too hard to prove themselves or impress people or whatever the crap may be. And there's all kind of examples of this. So if you're going out and you're just doing things you find fun, you're naturally going to attract people to you. You're naturally going to meet people. You're going to then build a new social circle. That's going to take away the pain and loneliness, and your life has leveled up as a result. So that's what I mean when I say embrace this pain. Quite often, the reason you feel sad or upset or resentful or angry or any of these kind of emotions is very fixable. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not obvious what is the cause and how it can be fixed, but it almost always can be fixed. And if it's a scenario where it's not particularly obvious, that's when I'd recommend go to therapy, counseling, etc. Find somebody to talk to, maybe do guided meditations, or depending on your country, there are certain substances that you can take that supposedly help with these kind of issues. In the UK and in the US, Australia, Canada, etc. I know for a fact that things like ayahuasca is illegal. You can't use it. Or you can't use it legally, at least. But there's lots of ways of kind of delving down into your kind of subconscious and developing specifically what it is that this trauma is and how it can be addressed and fixed. I'm just pausing.
So yeah, you just made the point about not only embracing your pain, but then with that pain, you'll potentially find a new pain. So for me, it was obviously, first off, I wanted to move away from the negative habits or habits I perceived to be negative, like for example, going drinking like 4 times a week, heavily drinking like 4 times a week at clubs. And then I got into a whole new issue of, well, now I feel lonely because my old friend group have kind of moved away from me, or I've moved away from them, however you want to look at it, just because we don't share those interests anymore. And the one thing I do want to say for anybody who is either going through something like this or could be going through something like this in the future, it gets a lot easier, because when I was feeling very lonely, and obviously my friend group and I had detached ourselves from one another, it kind of forced me to then get good at socializing again, because I was very much, because I've been in a big friend group for so long, I had no need to have the skill to go up to strangers and talk to them. Like, I could, but it was never I needed to, or I never felt it necessary. I could just stay within at least part of a friend group and it would never be an issue. Whereas when I was then obviously kind of more separated and kind of with a much smaller friend group, for example, if like you were busy, Harry, and I wanted to go do something, it wasn't then a case of, well, okay, I'm just not going to go out and wait. It then gradually shifted into okay, that's fine. Well, I can either go out with people that I've like rarely spoken to and get to know them a bit better, or even if I was on a night out and it was with a smaller group, I would then be able and almost forced myself to go up to groups of strangers and just be like super friendly, get to know them, talk to them, and spend time with them. And while a lot of these people, especially on like nights out at that point, aren't my friends today, the point is, through doing that, I've not only gotten really good at being able to build social connections with people, but I actually really enjoy doing it. And this isn't to say that I'm always trying to make new people to be friends with, but just the ability for me to be able to go up to people that I don't know and talk to them and be comfortable enough to make new connections with new people, rather than living in the comfort zone of my friend group that I spend all my time with, is super, super powerful, not just for business, but for my personal life in general, and my confidence has skyrocketed since.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just something we can pull up quite quickly as well, which is this is very much a journey. It's not a kind of one trick and then you're there. It is a continual, never-ending system. So in the sense of, you find a trauma or a pain point, you tackle it, you take action, you improve, you level up. You're then inevitably going to have a new pain point and a new way you could grow and a new kind of direction you could take to improve and grow and improve again. You are able to stop at any point. This is not a kind of, once you're on the bus, you're going, and you constantly have to keep pushing through more pain points and continuing to level up. You don't have to, you can stop at any moment. There are certain things, for example, that I'm very aware that you and I both have, which are things that we could ideally do to kind of make ourselves better off in terms of our health, our fitness, our ambition, our financial goals, etc. But equally, you and I have kind of, not separately, not kind of not through collusion, but you and I have kind of separately come to the same conclusion of those things. Yes, we could do them, but as it stands currently, the sacrifice necessary seems too great. So it's not something we're willing to do. That can obviously change with time, but it's not this kind of, I don't want you to feel like this is almost kind of like a cultist kind of, you have to be leveling up constantly or else you're dying. There's no judgment to anybody who chooses to not level up. There's no judgment to anybody who chooses to not turn, look into that pain, look deep down and tackle it head on and go for it. However, what I will say, and I'm curious if you agree the same thing here, but in terms of the psychology and in terms of the kind of the archetypal story and the kind of teachings you can take from pretty much all the different religions out there, as well as kind of classical stories that have survived through many generations, whether that be ancient Greek stories or Roman stories or kind of Egyptian fables and myths, etc. The thing that a lot of them have in common is kind of this archetypal hero where the greatest fulfillment in life, the greatest happiness and the greatest success all comes from tackling that thing that you don't want to deal with, from leveling up, from dealing with that, looking the one place you don't want to look. And that often is at that trauma or that resentment or that thing that you know you're doing that's self-sabotaging you. It's a case of you have to look it dead in the eye and you have to embrace and you have to tackle it and you have to go straight after it. That you will find, although sometimes, like I said, there's nothing wrong with making the decision that the sacrifice is too great. And like I've said repeatedly, it's your life, so make your own decisions. However, in my experience, and according to a lot of these kind of great thinkers of the past and religious scholars and myths, etc., from a multitude of different cultures, not just a kind of Judeo-Christian one, or not specifically from just Aramaic society or anything like that, what you tend to find is the greatest fulfillment in life and the people who feel that they have reached their potential or as close to their potential as possible, the people who are most happy and most fulfilled and most kind of free from these kind of shackles of trauma, etc., are the people who will, when they see something that they don't want to look at, force themselves to look it dead in the eye and then go after it. So as much as I do strongly recommend it to every single one of you, it is your choice. Live your life how you see fit, within reason, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it is definitely, there are varying degrees. I'm going to call it varying degrees of Kaizen being constant improvement every day. And some people, like you say, some people will reach a point where they are happy with the level of improvement they've got and they don't deem it to be worth the sacrifice and pain it would take to push further. And that's completely fine. It's about getting your life where you want it to be, just like you said. And what you just said as well reminds me of a really nice quote from Joseph Campbell, where he basically says, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." And that is it exactly means what you just said, which is you need to look that pain in the eye. You need to go where not just you are too afraid to go, but where most people would be too afraid to go, respectively. And by going into those places where most people are too afraid to come, you will then find what you are looking for.
Absolutely. And I think to give a kind of concrete example, because we're talking very much in the abstract and the archetypal kind of realm here, to give a very concrete example is this. A lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of these viewers, and it's something that I suffered with when I was at school as well, so you're not on your own in this, kind of don't want to begin working out and getting fit and healthy simply because they are worried about the judgment they're going to receive when they go to the gym. Because you're going to go to the gym maybe a little bit overweight or rather small or timid or weak or whatever it may be. And you're worried that there are going to be people at that gym who are looking like they were designed out of clay. They look like the statue of David. They just look like perfect physical specimens of creatures. And you're worried that these people are going to judge you. Well, that is exactly the example of kind of Joseph Campbell used there, which is that is the cave. The treasure is the healthy body, the bigger muscles, the losing weight, whatever it may be, that your personal kind of glory is. The treasure in this cave is whatever your goal is. But to do it, you have to first face the dragon in that cave. And that dragon is the judgment of other people. And you have to face that judgment. You have to overcome it. You have to learn to just not give a flying fuck about it. And by doing it, not only do you become more powerful and tougher and more experienced to take on future dragons, but you also gain the treasure at the end of the cave. And I think we'd all agree that treasure is a nice thing to have, and we'd all quite like to be able to find in real life a physical dragon where all you have to do is kill the physical dragon and you get a load of treasure at the end of it. That, in many ways, I think would actually even be easier than having to deal with a mental dragon and a mental cave and mental treasure, because it's more abstract, so people don't realize really how important these stories are and how they are kind of a fundamental truth, proven by the fact they appear in essentially every single society. I'm not going to say in every single society because I can't speak to the validity of that statement, but I can say in every society that I've studied, and I've been fortunate enough to have an education where I've studied a fair few different cultures, and I've lived in a few different countries. And in that premise, everything I've seen in terms of the traditional stories that have been passed through generations, they always have the same idea, which is wherever you don't want to go, wherever you don't want to look, the thing you don't want to do most is the thing you have to now go do, because that is where the greatest reward will be. And that could be going to the gym and overcoming the fact that you don't like how you look. That could be overcoming the fear of rejection and asking that person out. It could be overcoming the fear of embarrassment and going and standing up in stage and doing an open mic night, whether that's singing or comedy or whatever it may be. It might be overcoming the fear of rejection, like J.K. Rowling did, and write the copy of your book and send it to publishers and get rejected repeatedly. I think it was over 50 times or something insane for J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter first edition before she finally got accepted and published. So all of this success that people have comes through a multitude of rejection. It comes through a multitude of hurdles that you have to learn to overcome. Now, the great thing about life is you can choose the hurdle. You can decide whether it's going to the gym. You can decide whether it's going to ask your boss for a promotion, asking the person out, whether it's saying, you know what, I'm a bit messy, so let's work on that, work on my own personal discipline, work on my hygiene, work on the fact that I have a mild caffeine addiction, the sponsor of the show, apparently. There's all these different things you can be doing, and you get to decide what dragon you face. But in my opinion, the important thing is you do need to pick a dragon. You do need to face it, and you do need to overcome it. And you may not overcome it first time, and that's absolutely fine. But you do need to have a dragon to face, because otherwise you're the hero without a villain. And that's the most boring story of all time. Harry Potter would be a really boring film if all it was is Harry Potter turned up and there were no bad guys in the entire film. So Harry just went to school and had an education. Nobody would watch that. Nobody would watch Spider-Man if there weren't bad guys to face and there's just Spider-Man swinging around the city and that's all he did. It was just parkour videos. Do you know what I mean? We need that villain in life. And the villain is kind of this yin-yang idea of ourselves, which is this Taoist idea, which is you are your own worst villain and you have to face yourself. And facing yourself is that subconscious. It is that trauma. It is that negative self-talk. It is all these things that I preach so much about mindset. And I know I come across as preachy, and I know I do selflessly plug my own book on mindset and helping all these things. But genuinely speaking, it is because in my experience as a coach, in my experience as a human being, in my experience as a sibling, as a child, as a parent, as a friend, it is the thing that's holding people back. And I think that there was a time in generations long gone where the difficulty of survival was in itself enough of a dragon. Whereas now, because you have a slightly easier life, we have a life where you don't really ever have to leave the house. Amazon will bring things to you, including food. You can have food brought to you. You can work from home on a laptop, and you can exercise inside on a treadmill. There's no reason to leave the house. I think that's making us become slightly softer, and therefore the dangers and the dragons we have to face have moved from physical lions and bears that our ancestors had to face in caves to more psychological and metaphysical kind of creatures that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people have issue with it, because if it's a physical dragon or a physical lion, it's very concrete, and you can easily understand, okay, well, if I kill a lion, I don't die, or I have a meal for the night. Whereas, like you say, because it's mental, a lot of the energy and the pressure actually goes down on you to not only overcome a dragon, but actually understand what it is and understand that it is in fact a dragon. And that kind of, there's extra steps involved that make it more difficult, or even more difficult, to overcome that problem, basically. And one thing that I wanted to expand upon was your concrete example you gave, which is a very good example. And the thing that I found as well, just for anybody who's curious specifically with this example, but also in terms of wider pain points, is I have never, with the exception of maybe once or twice, like there are obvious exceptions to this, but for the most part, I have never been criticized or made to feel smaller, like especially with, let's say, working out. Nobody who is fit and healthy themselves has ever criticized me for trying to get fit. Like, for example, when I've been going for runs, I don't, my concern is that people are going to look at me and either laugh or they're going to mock me for trying to run. But anybody else that I see running around when I go for runs, they are always putting their hand up, smiling, waving, and just, they seem supportive of it. They've never mocked me or laughed or anything like that. And like the times I've been to the gym, it's never the fit people that mock you, ever. Looking mostly back to when I was at school in the gym, like there were obviously, it's kids, the students, obviously there are people taking the piss out of each other, but it was always people who themselves weren't that fit, and me trying to work out, they would then mock. But the people who were physically fit and did go to the gym, they were always the supportive ones. And it always seems to be the people that are ahead of you, or people that are ahead of you in whatever respect, aren't the people that mock you. It's the people that are behind where you are in that respect. And it's for the reason that Harry talked about earlier, which is you remind them of their wasted potential, essentially. Like they could be working out, for example, and if you're the one working out and they're not, it's easier for them to mock you and bring you down to their level than it is for them to actually admit that something's wrong and then go through that pain themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Even to take that one stage further as well, one thing I'd say, which is one of the reasons why people who are ahead of you on this journey, or where you are on this journey, are going to be more supportive, is the fact that because they're on the journey, they know how difficult it is and they have respect for that. Say, for example, I've got friends who are freaks of nature. They are 6.5 feet tall. They have arms the size of legs, perfect six packs, perfect abs, etc. These are people who put in time and effort every day. They have no days off. They're constantly focusing on their diet, their nutrition, their supplements, and they're constantly training and trying to get bigger and stronger, fitter, healthier, faster, and all these other things. They are aware of the sacrifices that are necessary to get to that level. So when they see somebody, for example, who's slightly overweight, just in the corner on the treadmill, kind of trying to just do a little bit of cardio, trying to take those small first steps towards getting fitter and healthier, they remember how difficult it was for them when they started. They look at it and they have respect for that, because you know what? You've been willing to take on the dragon. Now, you may not succeed first time. You may not get that treasure for another year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Maybe it'll be in a few weeks, who knows? Maybe it'll be the first day. It completely depends on you and the dragon and the specific kind of treasure you're after. However, as soon as you take a step, anybody who's taken a step down that same path can say, you know what? I remember how fucking difficult that was, and I respect you for trying, because 99% of these other people just aren't. They look at this dragon and they go, nope, fuck that. And they don't even try. So even by taking a step in the right direction, you will garner the respect of other people. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And the people who don't respect you, and the people who try and hold you down, the people who try and push you, keep you where you were and stop you from leveling up, those are people who, they're trying to hold you down for exactly what we said earlier, which is that you're reminding them of all the things they could and they know deep down should be doing. However, at the same time, they're people you just don't want in your life. So feel free to let them go. you will find new people, you will find mentors. One of the reasons why finding a mentor is actually a far easier process than people think is exactly the same process. If I meet, one of the reasons why I've become a coach is I remember how difficult it was for me to overcome social anxiety and to fix my mental health and to fix all these kind of problems I'm facing. So it becomes natural for me when I see somebody who's in that same kind of situation that I was in, who genuinely is willing to put the work in to improve themselves mentally, socially, physically, etc. I naturally kind of see them as a younger version of me. Whether they're actually older than me or not is irrelevant. I see them as a younger version of me because they're further back on that path than I was. And I want to help them get through that path as quickly as possible. So naturally, you're going to find mentors along the way, whether that's going to the gym, you'll find somebody who's maybe physically larger and stronger than you. And you can say, oh, out of interest, I've been trying for a few weeks now and I'm not noticing too much of a gain in, say, my bicep or my tricep or just my arm size in general. Do you have any advice that could help me? And you will find these people, for the most part, obviously there'll be some people who are maybe a bit more insecure and they don't want to help people out. But the vast majority of people who have worked and had to kind of physically put the effort in to slay this dragon and get this treasure are more than happy to help kind of show and share the advice and the experience they have to help other people achieve the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely what I'm noticing more and more with anything that I'm trying to do. It's always people who have done it for the most part, as you said, they are willing to essentially share their secrets and help you overcome that dragon in the same way. Because people like that not only appreciate that you've started to take it on, which is more, like say, more difficult and more than most people have actually bothered to do, or more people are willing to do anyway, but equally they understand like the positive benefits that it can not only have on the individual in question, but also everybody in their social circle. You know, if you're working out and your mindset is better, you become more confident, you're happier. That's not just going to stop with you in terms of positive benefits. That's then going to rub off on your friends, your family, your partner, if you have a partner. It's going to rub off on everything. And then it can have, it's a butterfly effect. It's literally that. And most people who have gone through some sort of struggle like that, they are always going to be willing to help people have that kind of positive effect on the world. And that's kind of the way I look at things as well. Like there are definitely people that are better at me in a lot of respects, and I learn from those people. But when there's somebody who's, let's say, just starting out in the entrepreneurial kind of path, if there's any way that I can help them, then I'm going to work with them, like you do with your mindset coaching side of things. It's if you can help somebody overcome that dragon, then that's not just positive for them. You get fulfillment through having a positive impact on their life yourself, and it then has that wider impact on society and even just their inner circle.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And one thing I will say, and I apologize in advance to pretty much every single person who offers coaching in the world right now, which is a great deal of us will give a lot of free advice out without even realizing we're doing it. For example, obviously it's no secret that I have clients who pay me and I've got a business out of it. However, if I see a DM from somebody who says, hi, I saw this video or I saw this talk on this topic, or I read something you wrote on this topic, and it's a simplified question that I can answer in a couple minutes or in a few minute voice note or whatever it may be, I will probably almost always answer that question. You may not get the same kind of one-to-one and the same kind of benefits you will get from being a paid client, because then I obviously put a lot more time and effort into it, and I'll kind of follow up with you and we'll have individual one-on-one conversations where you can ask questions and we can clarify terms and we can get on Zoom and all sorts of things. But most coaches, you can send them a singular question saying, I just need some advice on this. What do you think? Most of them will reply and give you an answer. The ones who don't tend to either be very, very busy. So say, for example, like one of your mentors, Craig Ballantyne. If you DM him, you may not get a direct answer straight away answering the question. However, he'll be giving out so much free content and so much advice through podcasts, books, YouTube videos, Insta Reels, etc., that you'll be able to probably find the answer somewhere. The same for you, Jordan. You put out a lot of content on Instagram in particular, on LinkedIn. So you'll be able to find so much information for free, which you should be taking advantage of. So in the case of, let's use the same thing, which is somebody's got sadness, depression, resentfulness, all these kind of negative emotions in their own head. And it's because they realize that they hate themselves and they feel guilty and they're resentful to themselves for not taking care of themselves physically and being healthy and happy and strong and powerful like they could be and living up to that potential. One thing you can definitely do is go find a personal trainer who, maybe if you message them, say, hi, can I have some advice on where I can start? Something simple where you're not asking too much. Most will probably be willing to say, okay, if you've got no idea where to start, here's where I'd start. Or they'll have some content somewhere that you can find that's for free and you can use. And then when you get started, then after you've done something by yourself, that's when I'd recommend get coaching in. Bring in somebody who you can go, right, I've started the process by myself. I've started, for example, doing push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and dips. That's after you've got a little bit of progress, you can then turn around and bring in a coach and say, right, in the case of a personal trainer, right, I'm doing this. I'm not really noticing much of a gain in terms of my arms. My chest is growing and my back's getting stronger and I can feel it in my legs, but I don't seem to have anything in my arms. And they can correct the technique by watching it. It's the same with kind of mindset coaching. A lot of this stuff you can start by yourself, and a lot of this stuff you can learn entirely by yourself without the need for me, which is a terrible terrible thing for me to admit from a business standpoint. However, the advantage you get from kind of paying for coaching is the fact that you have me there to physically course correct you as you're working, as you're doing something, as well as sharing information that may be not easily digestible in a 5-minute clip or a short soundbite, etc. And therefore, I don't even try and put out into the world in a 5-minute video on or a 2-minute podcast or whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. It's the analogy I kind of like to use it sort of relating to your last point is learning a skill to, let's say, an expert level is like trying to read a huge book that is about 10,000 pages long. Doing it on your own is like reading that book from start to beginning, all 10,000 pages, every word, trying to make your own notes, trying to understand what is and isn't relevant to you. Having a coach, like for example, you, Harry, is essentially like literally having somebody there that just says, okay, now read page 1, 200, and 4,000, and that is what you need at this point. So you don't have to read
being handed the summary.
Exactly. Yeah, the summary of each point but not just a summary that is specific to you as a person. And the amount of time and energy, and I mean, it can even get you better results at the end of the day, because you could misinterpret something, you could read the wrong part, go down the wrong path. And that is the benefit of having a mentor in that kind of, or the biggest benefit of having a mentor anyway, in that kind of context. In terms of questions, I've only got one more. It's a bit of a deep one, so I want to get your thoughts on this, Harry.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, in your opinion, from your perspective, what is happiness?
Fucking hell. I think happiness in terms of a definitional standpoint is ineffable. I don't think it can be put into words or explained. I think it's something that you just know when you see it, if that makes sense. I do, however, reckon I can answer what creates happiness. And I think happiness is when you detach yourself from time. And I mean that kind of in a obviously quite a flippant, but obviously in kind of a literal way at the same time, which is, you're happy, for example, when you're spending time with friends and you feel like 5 minutes have gone, but you look up and it's been 3 hours. Happiness is when you're, say, for example, an artist or an author, and you're doing some work, and you're doing this sort of passion project of yours, and you look up and half the day's gone and time has just disappeared. Happiness is when you spend time with your child and it feels like it's been 10 minutes and it turns out it's been 3 days. Or you feel like the first time you brought your son home from the hospital was only a few days ago. You remember it like it was yesterday, but actually it's been a few months now. That's what happiness is. Happiness is when you just lose track of time and you kind of just wish you could pause and live in that moment forever. That's how I define happiness, at least. And I think that's created by fulfillment, and I think it's created by doing exactly what it is that you deep down know you should be doing. So whether that is, in my case, these passion projects I have, things like this podcast, helping people, coaching people, trying to make myself a better husband, a better father, a better son, a better member of society, etc. And spending time with my son, or going for walks with him, etc. Those are the things where time, it feels like somebody's fast forwarding through my life. That's what I think happiness is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely agree. I experienced that sort of thing. The only thing I would touch on is, specifically, you mentioned about an author writing, for example. Now, obviously, I write a lot of copy. I write for at least an hour's track of time. Like, I think it's been 5 minutes, and then I'll have written, let's say, 5,000 words, and it's actually been an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours, however much it's been. That, could you not say that, because that is a flow state, that's not happiness, but would you then argue that you can only enter that kind of flow state with something that does fulfill you? Or like, what would your thoughts on that be?
Yes, I think a flow state is a term, a very accurate term, but I think it's a term that we use to describe the process, the manifestation of happiness. I don't think anybody gets into a flow state without some level of content, happy fulfillment. I don't think it's possible. I think back to when I was at school, or kind of the small little tasks I have to do in my life now, which I don't particularly enjoy, and they don't make me happy. They do feel like they go on forever. So I think that happiness and a flow state are they're linked, and I think they're mutually inclusive. You cannot have one without the other. Both are required. I think the sign of happiness is being in a flow state, and I think that being in a flow state is impossible without happiness. And maybe happiness and fulfillment and an absence of you're pushing me here because I'm trying to avoid using Jungian psychology. So I think it's when you've fully immersed between your shadow self and your conscious self. And when those two are balanced correctly, and those two are at peace and not warring with one another, then you are happy, fulfilled, and in a flow state. That's kind of how I would argue and phrase it. I think the two are intrinsically linked.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. That definitely makes sense. Like, I've never, that I can recall, I've never got into a flow state with something that I didn't find fulfilling. But I do find writing copy for various different things, for books, for content on social media, for courses, for websites, whatever it is, I do find that fulfilling. And as a result, yeah, I get into a flow state pretty much every time I write, as long as I'm writing for kind of more than, let's say, 15, 20 minutes. Last sort of question then is, I genuinely believe that there are different levels of happiness, or as John Stuart Mill, the philosopher, kind of described it, different levels of pleasure. You've got higher pleasures, you've got lower pleasures. Do you agree with that? And concretely, kind of specifically, what I'm talking about is, you have the happiness and or the pleasures that fulfill you. These are the things that fulfill you in life. So, for example, for me, it's copywriting. For you, it's basically being a mentor and a coach, and being a mindset coach to people and helping them boost their confidence, etc. Do you believe that there are different, therefore, types of happiness and pleasure? You've got this type of fulfilling happiness, this type of fulfilling pleasure, and then you have other types of happiness that are more gratification, instant gratification, than actual happiness?
Oh, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt. The simple truth is, one of the happiest moments of my life, without even hesitation, without a shadow of a doubt, was the first time I held my son in my arms. Now, I'm sure I would also be happy if I went and injected heroin, but I don't think the two things are even remotely comparable. That's not a criticism of anybody who does heroin, as we kind of stated earlier. My stance on it is very much a case of, I couldn't care less what you do with your own life and your own body. Just make sure you're not hurting anybody else in the process. But yeah, so obviously there's gradations of happiness, and obviously there's gradations of fulfillment. And I think obviously there's a hierarchy of what is best in terms of your fulfillment. So I think that being, like you use the term instant gratification, I think living a life based on a kind of nihilistic instant gratificational process will lead to many short-term happy moments. But when you zoom out and you look over a macro scale, you'll see that a lot of these kind of sudden instant gratification acts, or these kind of this behavior that seeks out instant gratification, is often born out of, there's an underlying pain that they're trying to distract themselves with, kind of to go full circle back to how we started this. I think that a lot of the time when people are drinking a few beers at night just to be able to help them sleep, or they're watching Netflix, binge watching till the middle of the night, or they're doing these kind of behaviors that they know are bad and they want to stop doing, but they can't find a way to stop. I think very often those are behaviors that are instantly gratifying. And we're using that instant gratification as a way of covering up an underlying, more kind of deepened unhappiness. And we're using lots of kind of short-term victories, for lack of a better phrase, to hide from the fact that we are deep down losing in the battle to be happy. And I think vice versa applies the same, which is, the thing that I've noticed is the people who I have around me, and the people I've noticed who are truly happy, are the people who don't have these kind of vices. I've seen transformations of people who I knew when I was at university or when I was at school with, who were essentially drug addicts. And they had every vice under the sun, from kind of sex addiction, porn addiction, cocaine addiction. They smoked marijuana all the time. They drank all the time. I'd argue they were probably an alcoholic. They never slept. They just always need to be doing something, a million distractions. They had kind of almost every addiction you could think of. They gambled, etc., all these different things. And something happens in their life, and I'm not going to get personal into their lives, but something happens and it changes everything. And they suddenly have this realization, and they suddenly become more content, more fulfilled, and more happy with who they are deep down, and more happy with their lives as a whole. And then it's almost like, oh, the addiction just disappears. Now, certain things are obviously biologically addictive, and I mean that in the sense of physical. So it means like alcoholism, if you're a genuine alcoholic and you just stop cold turkey, you can die. Same with heroin, etc. However, and I'm not saying that they were able to do that, for example, but what I am saying is, say, for example, things that don't have a dependence to them, where it's more of a psychological addiction, like, for example, marijuana seems to be, based on a lot of the, I don't particularly want to call it study or science, but based on a lot of the supposed science and the supposed studies that kind of get thrown around on the internet that I neither believe nor disbelieve. I don't know enough about the science or pay enough attention to have an opinion on. But a lot of this seems just that marijuana has no physical addictive nature. It's all a psychological addiction. And I feel that once you have this level of kind of meta fulfillment or meta happiness in your life, that all the kind of the small victories, like smoking marijuana or taking cocaine or drinking or being promiscuous or porn or whatever it may be, all of these kind of just disappear, because you don't need them to distract from your happiness, because you're just permanently happy. You don't need a small happiness to distract from the bigger happiness, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because when you've got people like alcoholics, drug addicts, gambling addicts, I think it's about the reason why you do these things. If you enjoy gambling, for example, there's nothing wrong with gambling. Addiction comes about because you're using the gambling to fill the void of happiness. If you're getting fulfilled on a higher level by doing something, whether you want to call it your mission, your purpose, your reason why, you don't need those lower pleasures, though, your gambling, your alcohol, your drugs, to fill that void of happiness. So there's nothing wrong with continuing to do those things. For example, I do enjoy the occasional drink. I enjoy smoking cigars. But I don't do them to fill a void of happiness, because I am fulfilled from what else I am doing. For example, my business, my fitness, my relationships, I'm fulfilled from those. I purely do things like that because I enjoy them and it fulfills me in a different way. It doesn't fill the void of happiness, as with, like I said, alcoholics, drug addicts, gambling addicts, even marijuana addict, all these sort of people. So I completely agree with you. And it's not a case of you become fulfilled and you suddenly don't do any of those things anymore. You can if you want to. But like I said, like I enjoy the occasional drink, I enjoy an occasional cigar. It's not to fill the void. It's just because I enjoy them, and it fulfills me then in different ways. And I think that's the important distinction that people need to understand. It's not a case of being a monk or being a drug addict. It's a case of finding the mediation and balance in your life that gives you that kind of contentment, fulfillment, and that drive to be what you want to be. Any thoughts on that, Harry, or have I broken up?
No, nothing to add at all. I think that was really well explained.
Okay.
Okay,
cool.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think most of life is about it. Like, I'm not kind of casting stones at all, or there's no judgment towards anybody who drinks or does drugs or smokes or any of those. At the end of the day, everybody has vices. What I'm just in case I wasn't as articulate as you were, perhaps in my explanation, it's when it becomes a chosen vice and not an addiction, is I think when you notice it. For example, you and I smoke cigars. That's not an addiction. That's not something that makes us. That's not a distraction we use to hide our unhappiness. That's something we use to kind of just add to our happiness. If that makes sense. That's topping the cup up. It's not the first thing that's in the cup. The cup of happiness is already right to the brim. We're just topping up so it overflows. It's kind of a metaphor I'd use, kind of wishy-washy and hastily. Exactly. It's the cream on top. It's the cherry. Absolutely. So yeah, I have nothing else to add. I think that's been articulated incredibly well by you and quite less accurately by me, but maybe more in a abstract, more archetypal, wishy-washy kind of way.
That's fair enough. That's me most of the time, so yeah, don't worry about that. I just thought my internet had frozen for a second.
No, I was just pausing to allow you to finish your thought in case you had more to add.
Okay, cool. Well, that's actually it for my questions then, and everything I kind of wanted to talk about. Do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, not at all. I think you've allowed me my kind of room to rant. I think you've asked really interesting questions. And you've all kind of been giving your thoughts and your feedback along the way. So I think that's really interesting. And I think that's quite a good place to stop as well. As kind of always, my kind of last thing to say is always a case of to the viewers. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Like, drop comments down below. Let me know. Obviously, both our personal links are in the description. Feel free to kind of message me saying you're a fucking idiot and here's why, and kind of let's kind of have a debate going, because I'm curious if anybody disagrees. Obviously, a lot of this is based on my own life experience and the life experience that I've seen and I read about and I've been exposed to. I'm not claiming to have 4 PhDs in the field. Instead, it's a lot more specific and anecdotal research. So if there is anybody out there who disagrees, please, by all means, feel free to kind of be involved in the conversation. Specifically, if Dr. Jordan Peterson is watching this, like, please get in touch, because I think there's some interesting similarities that we seem to have approached, but from slightly different pathways to get there. And I think that it'd be quite interesting to see if we can reconcile some kind of small differences that we have. But just in general, to any of you, if you have any kind of differences or anything in particular you kind of disagree with or you really do agree with, like, comment down below, let us know. If there are any questions you want us answering in the future, let us know. There's an email address down there specifically that Jordan takes care of, or he has one of his team take care of most likely, where you can just send in your questions and things like that. So yeah, just let us know, give it a like, give it a share, send it to your mom, send it to your nan, send it to your brother, send it to your boss, like
Send it to
share
your
the
dog.
word.
Okay. Yeah.
Send it to your dog. Sure, get your dog to create an Anchor, a Spotify, and a YouTube account, and the dog can pay attention as well. Maybe, I don't know how much mindset help the dog's going to get from this. It's quite human specific, but who knows?
Yeah, and as well as one thing I wanted to kind of touch on is even if you just want to get in touch and share your specific experiences, like that would be really great to hear. Because like Harry kind of touched on, we are talking from our individual experiences, and every single person is going to have different experiences. So if you want to even just get in touch and share those with us, that would be fantastic to hear for sure. Okay, cool. So Harry, if you've got nothing else you want to ask or kind of say.
No, I'm happy to leave there, mate.
Okay, cool. Then we will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, drop us any questions or any thoughts you have about today's episode, either in the comments or, as Harry said, through DMing or emailing us. The links will be available in the description. This has been Jordan Lewis, and I've been with Harry Kutras. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next week on the Regal Podcast.